Hello and welcome to this next video in our series on modeling historical architecture based on archival data. In this video we're going to look into modeling one of the most important elements of a building, namely its windows. We're first going to look into the technique that you need to model the holes for the windows and doors. We are going to use the so-called Boolean modifier in Blender. And afterwards, we are going to model the window frames. So let's start by turning on the source material again, also turning on X-ray or transparency, and then go into the front orthographic view. So we want to create an object that can be used to cut out this window. We're going to use a cube for that again. So we go to Add Mesh Cube. Make sure that the 3D cursor is positioned inside the window before you do that, so you don't have to search for the cube anywhere else in your scene. And then it is a matter of adjusting the cube to the outer edges of this gap. So we make sure that face selection is on and the move tool is on, and then we simply drag these faces into position. Remember, you can only select the faces from the sides of this cube because we have X-ray or transparency on. Without it, it would be impossible to select these faces with face selection mode. So we have now the sides aligned with the outer edges of the gap. Then there's one more thing we need to adjust, and that is the back side of the object. So this object is going to be used as a cutter to cut a hole in this other object that we have used for the walls. So we have to make sure it has a sensible depth, and a sensible depth in this case is the depth of the thickness of a wall. Generally, it is the same as the length of one brick. And in this case, we could also measure it. So in here on this cross section, we have the thickness of a load-bearing wall represented. To measure it, it's best to first turn off transparency, turn off the reconstruction, and then get the measure tool. And for the measure tool to stick to the surface, we hit Control, little circle. So you can see it's approximately 28-29 centimeters. So how do we make sure that this is exactly 29 centimeters back from the front face of the wall? Well, first we're gonna turn on snapping over here, and then we're gonna select the back face of the object that we're going to use as a cutter, and we drag it to this location, so it should be now aligned with, we have to double check if it is correct. I turn off the sources. Yeah, you see I was snapping to one of the architectural drawings. Now it's exactly aligned with the front face of the building. To get it 29 centimeters back, we just start dragging in this direction, and then over here at the lower left of the 3D modeling window, enlarge this, sort of the settings for the last tool that you used, and I can modify the distance. So in this case I can simply enter 29 centimeters, and now it moved exactly 29 centimeters from here to there. So we have a depth for the window holes the same as the thickness as the walls for this building. Then it is simply a matter of multiplying this cube. Go into front orthographic view and turn on the source material again. Okay, I will turn off the cross section because it's interfering with my view. So how do I duplicate an object? Well, you go to the object menu, and then you find the option duplicate, and it says also Shift D. So Shift D is the keyboard shortcut for that. It makes it even faster. So I hit Shift D, and then I want to move it straight to the side. So this is on the x-axis. So I hit X on my keyboard, and you see that it sticks to the red axis now, so it doesn't go up or down. If I want to further fine tune it, I can use the move tool. And now I can do the same, but I will select both of them to duplicate. I will use the shortcut again, Shift D. And now I'm moving down using Z on my keyboard. I just hit it once and then it moves down, and I will do it again, Shift D, Z. So now I have 6 window cutters basically. And what I will do next, because for each of these it creates a separate object called cube, combine them in one object so I have less clutter in my scene. So to do that, I can go to Object again and then choose Join or Control J. I change the name to Window Cutters, for instance. And I move this object because this is not an object that I want to use in my final representation. It's a helper object. So I move this to the helper object collection. So now I will turn off the source material, and I will also turn off X-ray, so it's really clear what I'm doing. So to use these to cut holes in this one, I need a so-called Boolean modifier. The modifiers can be found over here, and then you go to Add Modifier, and in this case we can find the Boolean under Generate. So select Boolean. So what are Booleans actually, and why does it have this strange name? Well, Boolean mathematics is a branch of algebra. The name Boolean is named after the inventor of this type of algebra, Mr. Boole, and basically deals with 2 data sets. And in this case, it deals with modifying one data set using another data set by simple operators like addition or subtraction. So basically it allows you to subtract one object from another object or add one object to another object so they become one. In Blender you have 3 options with the Boolean modifier, and I will show you quickly what each of them does. But the first thing that we have to do is to have, so we have this is the target object, but this is the object that will be used for the Boolean operation. So I can use this eyedropper thing, and then I have to go over here and I see that it tells me the window cutters. Yeah, that's the one that I want. So the window cutters are now used, and I don't see any change yet, but actually a change has occurred. Simply these objects are now obscuring my view from the change. So what I will do is turn off the visibility of the window cutters, and voila, you can see that I have holes in the walls object. So you have a couple of options. Difference simply means the difference between 2 objects, so it's a subtraction operator. One object is subtracted from another object and create this new object. We can also choose union, which basically is addition of 2 objects. So I have this object and I had these other window cubes, and now they're added and joined into one object. And then one last option is the intersection one, and the intersection one gives you the area where these 2 objects intersect. Anyway, we need the difference only. Then there are here a couple of other options that you have that you sometimes may want to experiment with a little bit with if the basic one, the exact one, doesn't work out the way that you expect. So basically these are different mathematical functions to solve the combination or subtraction of different objects. And you can actually see when you turn on wireframe. So for you the wireframe visualization turned off, I can turn it on over here, and you can see the way that it creates these cuts into this object. So when I switch to, for instance, the float option, you can see that it creates lines at different locations. So it makes a different way of cutting these holes. And then there's the manifold option, which in this case doesn't work at all because it only works with so-called manifold objects. And manifold objects are for instance, objects that are completely watertight. There are no holes in them. And because we model this object with a hole at the bottom in this case, this manifold one doesn't work. However, if we go into edit mode, this is just an example. You don't have to follow along. And select these edges and create a face here with F. You can see that the manifold option also works, and that it is again a different way of reconstructing the new object than the other two. So for now we keep it on exact. That often gives you the cleanest results. An interesting aspect of these modifiers is that they are completely reversible. I can turn them off and I see my original object. And when I'm going into edit mode of this object, you will see that these windows disappear. So they are not permanent. When I want to make them permanent, for instance, when I want to start editing parts of this newly created object, I have to apply them over here in the modifier menu. So now I can go into edit mode and edit the individual parts of this. However, for as long as possible, you should try to keep this modifier on, because it makes making changes much easier later in the modeling process, when you discover, for instance, that the windows have a different shape. The next part is a little bit harder in terms of modeling, and that is to create the window frames. So we go back to the source material again. I have the cross section turned off, that's important. I turn X-ray on again and go into the front orthographic view. And I will also make sure that the window cutter object is not showing. So what I want to do now is to create the window frames. And as you can see, there's one outer frame, and then there's several smaller frames of the different window panes. So first we're going to place the 3D cursor at the location that we want a new object to appear. Shift right click, and then we're going to go to add mesh and add a plane. So this is the first time we're adding a different type of primitive, a plane instead of a cube. As you can see, the plane is just a line. That's because it's oriented with its face upwards, but we want to have it oriented with its face towards us. So over here, we're going to make sure this is large. We use view as the alignment. So now we can see that this plane is facing us. We go into edit mode, and we make sure that edge select mode is on, and then click on one of the edges. And then also make sure that snapping is on, because we want to align it exactly with the sides of the window gap. So put this one here, we move this one here, we move this one here, we move this one here. So before we're gonna create these window frames, I want to create this basic subdivision between three window panes. For that, I'm going to use a tool that we already know from a previous video called the Loop Cut tool. So I select it here, I click over here, and I hold the mouse button, and it will immediately go into the mode for another one. So another one I want to be located here. And then I'm going back to the selection tool. So I want to remove this edge over here, because this should be one window pane. So I hit X, and now it should be important that you do not simply delete edges, because what that does, it removes the entire face around it. So instead of deleting this edge, I use dissolve edges, and now the edge is dissolved inside the bigger face that we've created now. So we have the face here, one face here, and one face here. So we're going back to front orthographic view, And now to create the window frames, we're going to use a new tool called the Inset tool. It's available here in the menu, Inset Faces. I select it, and to create an inset, I simply start dragging like so. I can still modify it afterwards when I'm not completely satisfied with it. And this is it. So for the next window frame, so of these individual panels, I'm going to use the Inset tool again. And now I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut to do the same thing. I hit I on the keyboard. But as you can see, it does something that I do not want. It creates an inset for this entire thing, but I want to have an inset for each of these individual window panes. For that, you need to turn on the option individual. And then we can still modify thickness of these. So basically we have now created the partitions necessary to model this window frame, but it doesn't have any depth yet. So as you can see, and I will turn on off the sources again, everything is very flat. This frame, the larger frame, should come a little bit in front of the recessed frames of the individual window panes. To do that, I select this one and I will use the Extrude tool over here, and I can start. I will make sure that I have the snapping off, because otherwise it will possibly stick to an edge that I don't want to, and I can start dragging this into that direction. Maybe it sticks out a little bit, but more often this kind of window frames are a little bit recessed from the wall, so I move it a little bit back. So it's now quite shallow. So I will now select all the other elements and move them also back a little bit, like so. So finally, I will select the faces that will represent the window glass, and I will have to use extrude again. So I cannot just move them like this. It will give me strange window frames. Now I have to use the extrude tool again. So I go here to extrude, and instead of going in that direction, I will go backwards like so, going back to the select tool, and there you have it. This is our window frame. Now we finish modeling it, it's time to find it in the outliner and rename it to window. We could use a window 1 because this is window type 1, for instance. Maybe we're gonna model additional window types for this building. Now we're gonna have to duplicate it again, but first I'm going to move it into the reconstruction collection. I'm going to go into front view, and the same way that we used to duplicate the cube that we use as window cutters, we're going to duplicate these window frames. Go to object, duplicate object, hit X. You can see it doesn't exactly stick to the sides of the gap, so I will need to turn on edge snapping. So now when I'm trying to move, it will exactly snap to the edges of the gap. So this time I will use the keyboard shortcut Shift D, and I want Z, move them on the Z axis, and I will do it another time, Shift D, Z, and there you have it. Our building has windows on its front side. So now it's time to reorganize the outliner a little bit, so to clean up our scene. So we have now multiple objects related to the upper floors, so it may be now smart to create a separate collection called upper floors, and then we move the upper floors object with the boolean and all the different windows to over here. So using this technique you can model any kind of window or door and door frame that you have on your building. However, when the gaps become very large, for instance, when we look at the ground floor, it consists of one big wooden frame. And the Boolean technique is not really suitable or necessary to create a gap. We can simply replace the entire ground floor section. And how to model something a little bit more complicated like such a frame is the topic of the next video.